ABC News 4 Sports with Darren Stoltzfus.
A big night ahead at the Garden. Hello, everybody. I'm Darren Stoltzfus. The big dance in the Big Apple, the Sweet 16. The Gamecocks looking for an Elite Eight berth for the first time in program history. Sports Director Scott Eisberg joining us from his home state. The buzz around this Gamecocks team pretty loud and getting louder. Scotty, what's the day been like up in New York City?
Yeah, no question about it, Darren. This is a pro town. It always has been a pro town, but it's a pro town with a soft spot for college basketball. They really do love college basketball, and the fans are everywhere. A lot of college basketball fans, a lot of Gamecock fans, a lot of alumni associations renting out bars around Madison Square Garden here in New York. And about 3 o'clock today, if you went up to Times Square, let's just say South Carolina was painting the town red or garnet. Well, this is one of the more bizarre and surreal interviews I've ever done. Brad Rosenthal and I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school together. We lived around the block. He saw my social media posts yesterday about being in Times Square, and he said, hey, I sold advertisements in Times Square to the University of South Carolina for tomorrow, so we had to come out here. Brad, what are people in South Carolina getting with this?
Well, they're very excited, and we're excited for them. And, you know, being on the NASDAQ marquee and the Thomson Reuters marquee, really exciting stuff. They're reaching over 1 million people here in Times Square today, you know, to let everybody know about South Carolina, the Sweet 16. And my company, Branded Cities, was very happy to be able to give them some space on these huge marquees.
What are you selling to them to show the people?
Well, a lot about, you know, people up north here. We don't know much about South Carolina. We're with our Northeast colleges, so we're learning a lot about them, and they're telling us some stats about, you know, #1, you know, college town and all those things. So that's exciting, and learning about the players that are going to be out there tonight taking on Baylor. So that's something that is exciting as well for them.
Most important question: who is the best athlete ever at Plainview High School?
Not Scott Eisberg, I'll tell you that much. And it wasn't Brad Rosenthal either, but we had a good time growing up, and it's fun to see Scott here back in New York City, and we wish him well down south.
That's awesome. Well, South Carolina is all over Times Square right now, and he is the man who put him there. Well, there are so many ties from South Carolina to New York, especially in basketball. When Frank McGuire, the legendary head coach, came from New York to South Carolina, he brought so many players with him, so much success. Of course, that 1973 NCAA tournament run. One of the stars on that team was Casey Manning. Now he's a judge in Columbia. And, oh, by the way, he is the radio analyst for the Gamecocks all across the state of South Carolina. We got to catch up with Manning to talk about broadcasting these games, and not only broadcasting them, but reliving those old memories while he did it.
Madison Square Garden is special to me. To be the Sweet 16 here, let me help you out a little bit. I scored my first points in college versus Cornell here. I have a daughter that went to Cornell. But it's bringing back memories of all the great teams we had with Coach McGuire, the New York legend, the Irishman. And for this team to come back to New York in a Sweet 16, you know, it's almost, you can't put it in words.
So let's talk about the game a little tonight. Baylor and South Carolina. You'd have to say South Carolina is the underdog as the 7th seed, but South Carolina certainly hasn't backed down from that before. They beat Duke last weekend, the #2 seed. South Carolina certainly not as big or long as Baylor. Baylor certainly could get them inside and do some harm, but South Carolina does have some stars, guys like Sindarius Thornwell. Thornwell especially. He's a senior. He did not get to play at Madison Square Garden, and he would certainly like to see his career move on after tonight. Frank Martin is the man with the plan to beat the guys in those highlighter uniforms.
We got to get those bigs away from the rim. If you don't get their bigs away from the rim, then rebounding becomes real hard, and scoring at the rim becomes real hard. You have to drag them away from the rim, and in order to do that, you got to beat their zone in transition. You have to offensively. Everyone thinks when you say shoot the ball well, we're talking about threes. It's not just threes. You got to make some elbow shots. You got to make some shots from the nail. You got to make some short corner shots to drag those bigs away from the rim.
Once we saw that, we can play with these teams that are so-called, high-powered big teams, our defense is the #1 defense in the nation. I don't care what anybody says. A lot of people have said it. So with that being said, we can defend anybody and play our game.
Their defense is their biggest weapon. They get a lot of transition baskets because of it, and whatever they don't get there, they get on the offensive glass. So very similar to our team.
So here's an interesting tie to the game. Baylor's head coach Scott Drew, his brother Bryce Drew is the head coach of Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt beat South Carolina this year. But Drew, the one here in New York City, says that won't really help him. His team plays such a different style than Vanderbilt. Those scouting reports can pretty much be thrown away. Game time in about an hour inside of Madison Square Garden. But for now, live in New York City, I'm Scott Eisberg. Darren, I'll send it back to you.
Well, Scotty, quick before you go into Madison Square Garden, the win over Duke in Greenville, that's a completely different feel in that building last weekend. Madison Square Garden, New York City, a bigger stage, brighter lights. How do the Gamecocks handle that stage? What's the feel like tonight?
You know, Darren, I think there was more pressure last weekend in Greenville. There was 14,000 Gamecock exclusive fans in that arena in Greenville. The pressure was on South Carolina. If they laid an egg last weekend, they would have walked out heads low in front of all of their family and friends. Tonight, of course, you get that huge national TV audience. You do get the garden and the bright lights of the city and everything that goes along with it. But the bottom line in this, South Carolina's the underdog. I say they're playing with house money. Frank Martin does not agree with that, but who knows?
All right, Scotty Eisberg. I mean, back home, the law firm of Eisberg and Rosenthal, apparently not able to play much sports. You know, the thing I think about the Gamecocks tonight is that it almost feels like their win against Duke was like their big game, right? You've seen that happen before. You beat a team like Duke, you're like, yes, and then you come out flat tonight.
Or you beat a team like Duke and you roll through your next ones. We'll see.
Or it's a really nip and tuck game all the way to the very end.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. 7:29 tip-off on, I believe it is TBS. Yes, Scotty will join us again live tonight. After the game, we'll have all the reaction, all the fun stuff from Madison Square Garden. Big night for the Gamecocks.
All right, Darren, thanks. Weather tonight, great.
Yeah, not quite as cool as that, but still pretty great. Taking a look at the extended forecast. Nice day tomorrow, slight chance of showers Sunday evening, more chances Monday, Tuesday. But, I mean, in general, look at those temperatures, right around 80 plus or minus a few. Hard to complain, hard to argue with that. The only thing is we could actually use a little bit more rain because we are starting to get into a drought. Not quite there, but it's getting drier.
All right, Chris, thank you. And thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you back at 7 o'clock.
Catch